What is the biggest "this relationship won't last" red flag you've ever seen at a wedding? The pastor at the wedding, in front of a couple hundred people, said, "Can you believe that just 2 months ago she was in my house crying because she was so lonely and wanted to be married so badly? And now look at her, 2 months later getting married to a guy she met the next day." Even her elderly grandmother laughed out loud. Next story. I worked as a county prosecutor. I did a sentencing where the guy was sent to prison for about 2 years. As I was walking out of the courtroom, his girlfriend asked the judge to marry her to her boyfriend, who was going to prison. Judge said she needed a marriage license and there was a 2-day waiting period. He was basically telling her not to marry the guy. She pulls out said marriage license. The judge then says you need 2 witnesses, and she was alone. The dude's attorney grabbed me by the arm and enthusiastically volunteered us to be the witnesses. The wedding went through, and now I have a story for Reddit. Side note, the guy was in an orange jumpsuit and was shackled, literally shackled, during the ceremony. Too long didn't read. I sentenced man to prison, then served as best man in his wedding. Edit. As the prosecutor, I did not hand down the sentence. I handled the sentence for the state of Kansas. I was trying to keep the story short. Next story. I was a bridesmaid in a wedding, and right after the ceremony, the bride told me this wasn't actually a wedding because the groom couldn't get married as he was still married to someone else. She was 3 months pregnant, though, and was throwing a fake wedding to please her religious family and collect some money and gifts. So that was cool. And they divorced within a year. Next story. At the end of the ceremony, she changed into an extremely fancy going-away outfit, tied and purple and laced up down the sides. He changed into an old t-shirt and shorts that reeked of stale student bachelor sweat and said, "Oh, I didn't know we were dressing up." She gave him a look of the purest hatred and disgust. They separated 6 months later. Next story. The groom forgot the bride's name during his toast to her and called her a similar but very different name. Like if her name was Brenda, he called her Brittany. It lasted 2 years. Oddly, the wedding where the bride started labor during the reception is going strong 10 years later. It was absolutely a shotgun wedding. Her father pretty much told him either man up and marry her or get out of her life so she could find the kid a real father. The groom was at the time a stoner who most of our family disliked. I mean, I always kind of liked him, but I wouldn't have wanted to have a baby with him. I was certain she would be married as a single mom. And somehow between her 3rd trimester and the birth, he really straightened up. He worked for a few years, got injured, and became a stay-at-home dad while she worked. This is not a dig at him in the least. He's a great dad and seems to be a great husband. Their home is always clean enough to be super healthy, cluttered enough to be comfortable, and he cooks dinner 6 nights a week so his wife can come home and relax after work. Plus, while he was working, she was going to school for her special education certification, and he never once tried to discourage her or imply that it was a stupid job to want the way her mother did. But yeah, when your water breaks during the father-daughter dance, things will be said. Next story. Groom was sending texts to a very uninterested bridesmaid all night. Groom was also more interested in getting wasted with his buddies than being with the bride. There were also red flags before the wedding, of course. No surprise, they were divorced in less than a year. Next story. Years ago, I attended a wedding and reception of a friend and neighbor. At the reception, the bride started crying. Not happy tears either. I'm talking long, heartfelt sobs. 10 months later, she had a baby, and the next month, he beat her up so bad she passed out on the front lawn. Her ex, who was a big guy and father of her first 2 children, came over to their house and dragged the new husband out by his hair and beat his butt on the front lawn. New hubby left town, and she divorced him right after that. Then we found out his first wife divorced him for beating her up too. Next story. After the ceremony, the bride, who had epilepsy, had a seizure, and her family took her into a side room away from all the guests to look after her until she'd recovered. The groom didn't bother to go and help look after his wife. He was too busy getting drunk and partying with all of his boys. Even after the bride recovered enough to return to the celebrations, he didn't stay with her or comfort her, and she just sat there in tears for half the night. It lasted a couple of years before they divorced due to his selfishness and alcohol problem. Next story. The bride was a 32 to 48 years old. She was a compulsive liar. Said she had 2 to 4 kids, but that her ex killed them and got away with it. married the groom within 3 months of them meeting. He was 21 and a virgin. She drove a wedge between him and his extremely close family. She made him quit his waiter job because he wasn't allowed to talk to other women, and they got married in a Waffle House parking lot. Last I heard, they were still together. He can no longer have friends, of course, so I can't talk to him, and I'm a woman, so he's double banned. Next story. The groom was madly in love with his fiancée, as one would hope. Always got the vibe she just wasn't that into it, I guess. During the wedding, he was so nervous, he stuttered. Bride rolled her eyes, she looked mad. Then later in the night, after dinner and music had started, the bride got annoyed people weren't staying in their allocated seats. They had a wishing well for presents. We added our anonymous gift with a card and thought that was that. 1 week later, get an abusive call that we did not put in. This ended up getting so bad it tore down multiple friendships for the groom. Bride wanted enough money to buy a house. Turns out, bride was cheating on him the whole time, and someone who was also married. Edit. He ended up leaving her about 2 years later when a teenager, family friend, told him about the cheating. She then was threatening to take half his business if he didn't pay her rent for the following 3 or 6 months. All types of class. Next story. My cousin's wedding. He was in the army. His bride was 6 months pregnant, a senior in high school, and she had just turned 18 the previous day. Her grandfather was the officiant, and he gave a big speech about how marriage was only between one man and one woman, and no one can tear apart what God puts together. Then they opened their gifts in front of everyone like it was a birthday party. There was no alcohol, no dancing, no food. Within 30 to 40 minutes after the gift opening, the happy couple peeled out of the Boy Scout lodge, doing donuts while her teenage friends cheered them on. They spent the night at the hotel everyone else was staying at, separately, which consisted of him getting crap-faced with his friends while she was alone in their room. In front of our entire family, my sister said, "I give them a year." She was wrong, though. Within 3 months of the kid coming, they had split. And my cousin swears the kid isn't even his. The whole wedding was one giant effing red flag. Next story. I wasn't actually there, but a girl I went to high school with posted a video of her ceremony on Facebook. Groom was so drunk the best man had to hold him upright. Lots of swaying and random incoherent babbling. Bride didn't seem particularly fazed by it and had a sort of, just ignore him and let's get on with it kind of attitude. There was also an album of photos, and the groom was flipping off the camera in literally every single picture he was in. I was honestly shocked that the officiant went through with the ceremony, and doubly shocked she put it out there for everyone to see. Cue a few months later of, "I can't believe he's drunk all the time," followed up posts. They were divorced less than a year later. Okay, we've got a little mixed bag of stories so far, but if I'm seeing a pattern, if the groom himself gets super drunk and just ignores the wife completely at the wedding, that seems to be a telltale sign it's not going to go well. Next story. Went to a wedding for one of my older male cousins who has 2 sisters about my age. Apparently the bride talked to the oldest sister, whom the groom was very close to, and said something like, "Just so you know, you're not the most important girl in his life anymore. I am." Can't wait to see how this one plays out. Next story. Attended a very big, very religious wedding of a 21-year-old bride and a 22-year-old groom. They lied about where they met. It was on Tinder. During a round of truth or dare with the groom and his members of the wedding party the night before, he admitted his biggest love language is touch, but that his significant other hated to express any physical affection. All he wanted was to be cuddled, sometimes, and she'd refuse. He said he hoped it got better after they were married. All the groomsmen made frantic eye contact and changed the subject. Now, they're still married, as of a year later, but PSA, guys, nothing gets better after you get married. That's still your partner, and that's still your relationship. Edit. Religion is almost certainly not the determining factor for her preferences, and I know relationships where there is compromise can still work, but marriage does not inherently fix an aspect of your partner you are unhappy with. That is all. This guy is speaking the truth, man. This is a little lesson for all the guys or girls or anyone in a relationship, really. It's not that, you can't learn to compromise in a marriage, but if you're going to get married, you need to love the person as who they are, not with who they, could potentially be. So if you're not happy with somebody, don't commit the rest of your life to them. Next story. The groom spent the almost entire wedding glued to his female work colleague, to the point that the bride had to drag him away for their first dance. They also kept going off somewhere together. A friend tried to follow them outside, but it was too dark to locate them. You could see the obvious hurt on the bride's face throughout the day. Prior to the wedding, he'd taken his colleague away abroad for his stag, just the two of them, despite the wide's protests. And in his wedding speech, he pointed his colleague out and told her that he'd had the best time of his life that weekend. They're still together at the moment, but I don't see it being the happy ending that the bride was so desperate for. Next story. My own wedding, when my wife threw the bride bouquet over her shoulder towards all the single ladies. One of them took a few steps back to take a run-up and used the shoulders of some other girls to jump like a quarterback, making the final game-deciding touchdown. She literally flew over the other girls, but another girl got the bouquet before she could reach it, which didn't stop her. She forcibly snatched the flowers out of the other girl's hands while in midair. The flowers were ripped apart at that point, and a lot of the girls were falling and failing and stumbling to the ground. She emerged out of this pile of single ladies with a couple of destroyed flowers in her hand, her hair and cloth all over the place, and made a loud winning shout while looking around to find her boyfriend, who had quietly sneaked away while she was going berserk for the bouquet. It was hilarious and depressing at the same time. Her boyfriend ended the relationship shortly after the wedding. Next story. Technically the day before the wedding, my mother-in-law-to-be gave me some of her nice jewelry, but added that she wanted some of it back when we got divorced, not if. When. A year and a half later, as we got divorced, I sent all of it back to her, which apparently surprised her. PSA, I wish people realized how hard it is to make a marriage work through all the normal pitfalls when family members are not supportive or even downright unsupportive. Next story. The best man, the groom's lifelong best friend, was gay, and I mean gay. All but one of the groomsmen were gay. A few years after the wedding, the groom's father died. Within a week of the funeral, he told her it wasn't working and moved in with the best man. Everyone did their best to act shocked. Edit, I should elaborate, the bride worked with a couple of my friends, and then for them when they started their own business. I knew her for years before the marriage, from before she even met the groom. We never dated or considered dating, but we were part of each other's core social groups. We talked a lot. The bride and groom met in college. They dated casually. He would always take her to family functions back home, but when they were back at school, he would distance himself. From the first time I met him, I knew he was gay. This was before I met or even heard about the best friend. He didn't react at all to her or to other women. His eyes just didn't go where the eyes of a guy who's interested in women go, if that makes any sense. He was fit and well-groomed, and I saw more than one female flirting attempt. Crash and burn. All her friends tried to warn her. We literally took turns. My girlfriend at the time worked with a sweet little guy who performed in drag shows. We invited the bride and groom to go with us to a show and support him. The big, loud, downtown gay dance club had a straight night. That was a hoot, and a bunch of us used to go on a regular basis. He flatly refused to go to a gay bar. It's just sad that he wasted so much of his time keeping from disappointing his father, and that she wasted so much of her time participating in his lie. I don't and obviously can't know how happy they were together, but I hope it was bliss, but I doubt it. Next story. I come from a very large Indian family, portions of which still strongly believe in traditional marriage. Read child brides, forced marriage, uncle and niece marriages. There was one where the groom was clearly an abuser, but she was still forced to marry him. To no one's surprise, the marriage ended in a horrible, long, drawn-out divorce. Her parents still haven't forgiven her for divorcing him. In another case, a woman in the family eventually found the guy of her dreams and wanted to marry him. Love, marriage, and he's a good guy. However, as her older brother was unmarried, she was not allowed to marry until he did. So their parents forced him to marry an emotionally manipulative girl, which he clearly understood she was prior to getting married. He went through with it anyway on the pretext that he was okay sacrificing his life for the sake of his sister. Within 2 years, they were divorced. He eventually married again for love, but got divorced again. He is now preparing to marry for the third time, again at the behest of his family, because It's not okay for the older brother to be single while the younger sister is married. Next story. The bride was pregnant. The groom might or might not have been the father. She also invited her lover to the wedding and got really upset off with me because her lover was flirting with me. She had also slept with her sister's fiance 2 months before the wedding. At the bachelorette party, she was also snorting copious amounts of after her child was born. She got divorced and the hubby got custody. She ultimately went back to live with her parents because she kept getting fired and just couldn't support herself. Biggest train wreck I've ever seen personally. Next story. Dude I used to know called off the wedding with less than 24 hours to go. His bride had gone out for her bachelorette party and came back to their place crap-faced. While walking through their bedroom under the black lights they saw a big glowing white stain in the crotch of her pants running down halfway one thigh. Cue their last fight, where she eventually admitted to banging multiple guys during the party and bringing the gravy train home to the love of her life. It was all over, but the crying. Ugh. Oh, people suck, man. That's sad. But you know what? At least they caught it beforehand, called off the wedding before it happened. Next story. The bride didn't look happy to be walking down the aisle. She was smiling, but it was very much a pasted-on smile that I assumed was because she was nervous. Found out at the wedding that her parents had offered to pay for the big wedding or pay for a small wedding, then give them the money for a down payment for a house. But she wanted the wedding. Where we live, the housing market is insanely competitive, and this was at the peak of the housing prices right before the crash. Her parents basically offered her the ability to jumpstart their lives together, and she turned it down for the big party. With her as the center of attention, it was over within 2 years. She didn't even seem upset about it. Next story. At my brother's first wedding, his fiance's dad came into the room we were using to get ready and told my brother that if he wanted to leave, that he would take care of all the people inside and he wouldn't even be mad. My brother went through with it anyway, and they divorced 4 months later. Fiance's dad kind of saw something, maybe. I need more to the story. Next story. I wasn't at a family member's wedding, but looking at the pictures and video, I upset my mom by saying I give it 2 years, tops. There were easily twice as many pics of the groom with his mother as there were of the bride and groom. And the pics were odd, to say the least. Mom was hanging all over the groom so much and was so handsy and touchy it looked like they were a couple. They were separated about 1.5 years later. The bride and groom. As far as I know, the groom and his mom are still together. Next story. We actually had a false red flag situation a couple of years back. The groom had been acting way too flirty with the maid of honor all night, and even disappeared with her for a while. Turns out it was a Dr. Marston and the Wonder Woman situation, which my then girlfriend found out when she found the bride, as she described it, 6 inches of deep silicone into the maid of honor. The 3 of them are still living together. Seems to be working for them so far. Next story. My friend got married to his baby mama after their kid was a few years old. At their wedding, it was a good reception and the bride was a great wing woman. So a bridesmaid and I left to have a party of our own. Not great, and that's a whole different story. But we came back and joined the after party, and everybody was feeling pretty good. Well, soon enough, the bride was sitting at the bar by me and starts making comments and getting pretty grabby. I try to get away. It's awkward. So I wave my buddy, the groom, over and tell him what's up, he should probably get her out of here. She tells him she just wanted to feel my manhood, but I wouldn't let her. They proceed to get into a fight. Years later, they're actually still together. No way she's been faithful, but that's not my problem. He refuses to see it, and I wish him the best of luck. Next story. The wedding is happening tomorrow. They have known each other for 4 months. He speaks almost zero English, and this, in the country, is illegal. She is pregnant with his baby. This is her 3rd time literally in this exact situation. I'm going for the drama, mostly. Update. What a crap show that was. I feel bad spilling the juice on this, but here is what happened. So, her parents didn't come. Her mom allegedly told her she's a fool, and I guess they're all done with this. All the guests, including myself, seemed like random invites to fill seats. She put the wedding together herself, and it was falling apart everywhere. The limo driver hadn't been paid, I guess. The room for the party afterwards wasn't ready, and she'd invited more people than the host could allow, and people were being turned away or encouraged to leave early. The groom read a speech written by the bride in very, very broken and incoherent English. We had no idea what he was saying. He didn't know what he was saying. She was visibly annoyed with everyone and with the groom nearly the whole time. The lady officiating the wedding seemed to be the most stable one there, and honestly deserves an award for keeping her crap together. Next story. This is completely different, but a few friends thought it was a red flag. My wife stopped me before our wedding and made me take off my socks and shoes and my suit jacket. She then rolled up my sleeves and my pants and unbuttoned my shirt and said something like, "I'm marrying a hippie lumberjack, not a dang businessman." She was a little tipsy, as was I. It wasn't a very traditional wedding, but she is amazing and I love her. You could just picture Nana's face as I walked down the aisle with a wide open shirt. I think she took it better than her grandparents, though. Yeah, +1 for style. Hey, +2 for commitment. Next story. Older couple in their 50s. Bride never married, groom divorced with 3 kids. I was their wedding photographer. The bride's grandma told me, "Oh gosh." Bride's mom went all out on this wedding. "You know, we never thought bride would marry." Then rolled her eyes. Bride never smiled the whole day. The groom was completely drunk. After she got drunk, they made out, and it got even worse from there. Before I could finish their photos, I found out the bride was having an affair with a guy in the prison she worked at. Next story. I met my friend's to-be wife at the wedding. Never even heard of her before that day. She did several weird, "I'm getting a bad vibe" things, but the only one I really remember was her constantly facing the emblems on the champagne glasses in the same direction for the photographer, instead of enjoying her time or paying attention to literally anything else at the reception. And they divorced 6 months later. Next story. I have redneck cousins. I went to one of their weddings. Jello shots at the altar. The groom was wearing a flannel, which he tore off to jump into his grandparents' pool. Bride was wearing her classiest tank top and had a king cobra in her hands for half the after party. My cousin, the bride, told me that she only said yes because she couldn't see herself getting anyone better. About a year later, and they're still married. If they're happy, so I won't judge. Next story. Wasn't at the wedding, but the bachelorette party beach weekend. She fully acknowledged that she had confessed to cheating on her fiancé. He would be so hurt if he found out she cheated again, and she would absolutely never do anything to hurt him like that. A second time, proceeded to disappear into a random car, drunkenly make out with a random guy. I know there's a whole thing about bachelor and bachelorette parties and infidelity, but to call attention to how it'd be extremely effed up to do that again, and then proceed to do the whole thing again right after you swore you wouldn't, that seems extra special, yeah? Next story. Groom hated the bride's family. Groom's family didn't approve of the bride. Very awkward at a wedding, of course. Bride makes her promises, something along the lines of, "I promise to try and be worthy of your family." And we all raise eyebrows at each other. Groom's speech is all about how much he has helped his bride change for the better and how he made her what she is. Eyebrows are practically falling off the top of my head at this point. It's been a few months, so I guess we'll wait and see. I just thought it was very controlling. Next story. I brought my girlfriend to a buddy's wedding, and a conversation about kids came up. She told me she wouldn't want kids for at least another 10 years. We were only about 6 months in at that point, but things seemed pretty serious. I was sure I did want kids with her, and I told her I'd be totally supportive of her if she ever became pregnant, whatever her decision was. A few hours in and a handful of drinks later, she told me she'd gotten an abortion recently, during our relationship, but I had no idea if it was mine or not. Yeah, that's kind of a red flag, no? Next story. I was 15 years old, bridesmaid to my 16-year-old good friend who was 6 months pregnant and about to get married to the 28-year-old father. Her mother paid for a wedding of 100 people in a historic church. It was actually really fancy. Anyways, when bets were already being made as to how long the wedding would last at the reception, I realized I wasn't the only one with misgivings of the wedding. Most were betting on less than a year. Needless to say, no big payout was done. Next story. Bride and groom secretly marry. Tell no one because their relationship would cost him his job. They have a wedding 1 year later, about a month after she graduated, college, not high school. While at the reception, we were playing a counting game, which consisted of how many groomsmen has the bride slept with, which was all 8 of them. The groom had slept with 3 of the bridesmaids, so there was that too. Then we started the betting pool at the reception, which only played country music and served grits 3 ways with beer. I won the bet, though, lasted 6 months after the ceremony, which isn't too surprising when the bride went home with the guitarist from the band playing at the reception instead of the freaking groom. Next story. I'm at a poker table. Las Vegas, Labor Day weekend. It's late, Saturday night. Next to me, lady, mid-20s. Naturally pretty, a real country girl. She's a decent poker player, having a good time, had a second rum and coke, and is done with alcohol and is now drinking Diet Red Bulls. Next to her, dude, mid-20s, good shape, rough around the edges. He's a decent poker player, but he's drinking nothing but Jack and Rocks. And he's getting loud. For reasons I no longer remember, I assume he works in construction. It's about 11 p.m. now, and these two have been married for about 3 hours at this point. She has a bad hand, doesn't matter. She's gone from pretty good to breaking even for the night. He's dropped about $400 now, and I noticed that a couple of players are keen in on him. 12 a.m. He's getting louder, gets warned for swearing at the table. Everyone at the table is hoping to get a piece of his money when he starts going a bit crazy. 1 a.m. He's down $1,000 now. They are going to play all night. Their plane leaves in 10 hours, and they have no room at any hotel. 2 a.m. She's up $100 and is rock solid. She's gone from chatty to super quiet. Hubby is all over the place and is dropping about $200 an hour to the table at this point. 3 a.m. I leave the table. I can't help wondering what possesses a solid 8+ of a woman to marry this pathetic, drunken mess of a boy. I can't imagine a world where he didn't do something bad that night that she had to clean up. And looking back, I can't imagine a world where he doesn't do something bad that she has to clean up every few days. Next story. A very, at the time, Christian bride told me that the relationship was toxic, but they wanted to have sweet, sweet intimacy, but they were saving themselves for marriage. Flash forward several years, I'm friends with the groom, and they'd gotten divorced. He was now married to another woman who was devoutly Christian. He no longer believed, but he told me that she basically just put up with his disbelief, prayed for him all the time, and she wanted to have his kids. But he didn't want to have kids, and they are also now divorced. Next story. Went to a wedding of my wife's coworker. She was the sweetest person, and her fiance was a total slob. Just a cocky, out-of-shape, burned-out frat guy. Had told her, to her face, about all the girls he'd slept with and how he'd had perfect weeks where he'd slept with a different girl every night. Oh yeah. Pretty sure this was a bad technique to try and make her stick around and think he was desirable. Then, at the wedding, drank so much, really, remember this is a big guy, he passed out before anyone has even left, and she has to take him to their hotel room passed out and doesn't even get to finish her own wedding or have a wedding night. Oh, I feel so sad for her. Next story. I've seen it a couple of times. The groom gives this speech during the reception about the wife being subservient to the husband and how it says this in the Bible. The bride sort of jokes about how he's dreaming, and he very seriously is like, no, that is what is gonna happen. They divorced within 6 months. 2. Down-to-earth but somewhat rich guy marries girl with stars in her eyes. The wedding was insane. Like, as you walk in, there is a guy on each of the double doors opening them in unison. They actually paid 2 people to do this little dance and stand there all day. Then you walk in and see what must have been a $10,000 of a giant flower arrangement in the entryway. Then, another double door with 2 more guys opening them. The wedding was nuts with string quartets, no expense spared. Cue Jurassic Park. But during the reception, I overhear the bride saying something to her friends about how he better keep working to keep her. I've seen this sort of princess mentality before. It never works out. A relationship needs each party to be equals. So, they divorce within a year. Next story. At our own wedding, one of her ex-boyfriends came out and asked to dance with her even before our first dance. This happened almost 20 years ago, and I am now divorced. Only stayed married 6 years. Now, we got married in our hometown in Mexico, and things like this shouldn't happen in Mexico. Now this poor dude decided to show up uninvited. As we were sitting at our table, he comes with a clock as a present, puts it on the table, asks if he can dance with her. I will never forget the smirk on his face as he did this, followed by the said clock to his face and the butt whooping that ensued afterwards. In retrospect, it's not a moment I am proud of. I feel bad, actually. But some lines shouldn't be crossed, and that day, that guy crossed them. Next story. I was a groomsman at my friend's wedding. The rest of the groomsmen were guys he met while stationed in the Air Force. They knew his fiancée much better than I did. During the entire week leading to the wedding, she would call him constantly and just straight yell as soon as he answered. Then they would argue. During the week, the other groomsmen kept telling me they didn't like her and how much a female dog she was. At the wedding, one of the groomsmen comes up to me and says, "I can't wait to see you guys at his second wedding." I laughed so hard. Next story. We, friends of the bride, met the groom's parents for the first time just before the start of the wedding. Instead of offering nice remarks about our friend, their daughter-in-law-to-be, they spent the entire conversation talking about how wonderful their son was, which struck my wife and me as a bit odd. The marriage lasted a little less than 1 month, and resulted in the birth of a boy who was never met by his father, who not only demanded a paternity test, but who also never set foot in the state where his son lives, lest he be forced to pay child support, which he has never done, despite the wealth of his family, who were so effusive in the praise of him. Alright, so I haven't been keeping score exactly, but I think 1 month might just be the shortest duration we've seen thus far. Place your wagers now. Do you think it gets any shorter than 1 month? And furthermore, if I'm wrong about 1 month being the shortest, let me know. Next story. I was the photographer for a wedding last month. A friend hired me for her cousin's wedding, and the bride was my brother's ex, but that's a whole different story. Freaking small world. I was taking several pictures of the groom and his groomsmen. Normal ones, silly ones, and then I started asking them to just do whatever they wanted. And the groom was having a lot of fun with his buddies, just jumping in the air, wanting lots of pictures, and after like 10 different poses, the bride yelled at him, "Tonight isn't about you or your friends. Come here and let's take some pictures. It's about me, babe." Next story. My husband and I were catering for a small wedding, less than 50 people. They had actually had their first date in our restaurant and asked us to cater, which was very sweet. It was a seaside wedding, very DIY. Even my kids helped set up. Under each folding chair in the wedding, the audience, was a box to be retrieved and opened by the guests when the officiant told them to do so. The goal of this was well-intentioned. The guests would lift the tops of the boxes off to free what would become a sea of delicate butterflies, symbolic of their marital journey taking off. Well, the butterflies all died in their boxes due to oxygen starvation, and when the lids were collectively released, their limp corpses were swept up in a vicious yet timely gust of wind. One glorious moment, united, they were whipped off violently into the horizon. Very, very sad. Next story. I went to a beautiful wedding a few summers ago. It was a quiet backyard wedding in a beautiful woodsy neighborhood. The couple had been dating happily for 8 years and were about to buy a house. The only thing that seemed kinda off was the fact that the groom cried tears of joy, but the bride didn't. She spent the entirety of the reception dancing by herself or talking to family, not really paying her new husband much attention. But hey, it's a busy day, so nobody really thought much of it. 2 years later, she cheated on him with a guy she had just met, filed for divorce, and moved in with the new guy immediately. The husband was devastated and still hasn't moved on despite getting constant offers. But his wife very openly doesn't care and has since flooded her social media with cutesy updates and pictures of her new relationship. I suppose the wedding day was a glimpse into the imbalance of devotion in the relationship. I would suppose so. How do you get over someone you've spent 8 years of your life with, though? Golly, little insider info, man. My longest relationship has been about 9 months, and even that had me sitting like Mordecai in my room. Let's all wish this guy the best of luck, and anyone dealing with heartbreak. Next story. My cousin's fiancée hit on every male cousin of the day in our grandfather's funeral. In doing so, she bit me on the butt so hard she left purple bruise-lined teeth marks. On their wedding day, my cousin's mother offered to pay for literal literally everything if he wanted to back out. I can't think of a bigger red flag than your own parents saying, "I'm willing to spend 5 figures for you to stay single." Next story. His side of the family was not invited at the wedding. We never even met the girl, but my husband, groom's nephew, and his other nephew, which all used to be really close when growing up, were invited and expected to spend money on the bachelor party, which they did. They separated well over a year into the marriage. I saw it happen the other way around as well, a couple who were just so different that I expected them to break up rather than getting engaged. Had my doubts up to the wedding. Just before the wedding, she had this major panic attack. The groom was the only one who could comfort her and even walked her down the aisle instead of her dad. From that moment on, I absolutely believed they belonged together. Next story. My cousin, who's not a very nice lady, married some poor sucker rather quickly into their relationship. He was a super smart and successful accountant for an aerospace company, and she was a nobody. Not that it should matter in love, but in her case we knew what was up. We all knew the real reasons for this unholy matrimony, mostly because she's following the footsteps of her mom, who was a raging forest fire of a magnum gold-digging space idiot. We took great pity for the trauma, time, the large amounts of money this guy was sure to suffer. Anyways, during the ceremony, this guy spontaneously developed a tic. He started violently throwing his head back and forth, almost as if the good Lord himself was smacking him. Also, his jaw must have started to lock up because he kept opening it as wide as he could and sticking his tongue out. It was as if he had this sudden cramp in his entire speak hole area, and he wouldn't be able to utter the solidifying words at the "I do" part. When it was his turn, he took 3 big violent shakes side to side, stretched his jaw super wide, and it just looked like a heck no! A couple of months later, she was banging at least one other guy, accusing husband of beating her, but only he had marks on him, accusing him of being emotionally abusive, but only he was being an emotional wreck, etc. We all knew better. She was just like mommy. Next story. Husband hit on me at the wedding. Too long didn't read. He was a douche. She was pregnant. So my high school best friend got pregnant from the first guy she dated upon joining the Air Force. She grew up in a super strict and really weird household. I spent the night many times over 4 years. They had a dress code in the house that was similar to school rules but more restrictive. They weren't allowed to drink anything with meals, had to stand in the kitchen as a group after the meal and chug Kool-Aid, and they weren't allowed to date, ever. She lost her virginity to some guy in a shed after school. Got grounded all summer. She didn't know anything about birth control or dating around, so I moved back to our hometown a few weeks before she came home to get married. She asked me to be a bridesmaid, along with her 5 sisters, and I agreed. The guy brought his parents and enough friends to fill out the party. We spent 2 days around her house just getting to know each other, which was pretty fun, and I had been flirting with a couple of the guys, which annoyed one of the sisters. So she called me out for having a tramp stamp. For the record, they weren't called that when I got mine, and it really embarrassed me. I really hate being the center of attention, so it was extra awful, and I'm sure it was obvious that I was mortified. Anyways, the wedding went on. The bride bawled the whole time and was about 6 months pregnant, so she disappeared for a little bit to clean up after the vows. The groom and I ended up chit-chatting while everyone else was mingling. It was the first real time I had even spoken to him. He ended up talking about my tattoo and how sexy they were. I tried to play it off as him being polite since I'm a people pleaser who won't stand up for myself, until he said something about inviting me to his hotel room later to show me his own tattoos, which were apparently located in his not safe for work bits. I had no idea what to say, so I laughed, said I needed to change out of my heels. It was awful. I felt so bad for her. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything, most likely since they lived a couple of states away and I had just gotten married with a baby on the way. I would have been the one who was blamed. So I just lived with the guilt. She got divorced less than 3 years later, maybe 22 years old. He cheated a lot, and she finally got fed up. But she took a vow to be celibate afterwards. Because she had a child with him, she chose to be a single rather than confuse her child with a new spouse. I never understood her logic, but I supported her choice. It's been 10 years. She's still single. I don't feel like she's ever really even experienced what it's like to be with a good person, a good spouse. And I feel terrible for her. Alright guys, that concludes our stories of the biggest red flags you see at a wedding ceremony. Now, if you guys are trying to stay committed and have a loving, lasting, long relationship, I would avoid any of these pitfalls. Really, it seems pretty disastrous. I'm not married myself, but I'll keep most of these in mind. The biggest keyword and takeaway, I think, is just be a decent person, and we'll see how long that lasts. But if you guys have any stories that you would like to share as well, feel free to put them down below in the comments because we love reading a good little story now and then. And as always, thanks for hanging out with me, and we will see you guys in the next one.